Hi, this is Creston with the Colorado Avalanche Information Center. I'm here to walk you through an avalanche awareness presentation that will hopefully shed some light on some things you know or didn't know about avalanches. Oftentimes, I think about awareness as the unknown unknowns, or things we didn't even realize we didn't know. Truth be told, avalanches can be tricky, so understanding where they form in terrain, how they form, and how to avoid them is key to staying safe out in the backcountry. So let's dive in. In this presentation, we're going to learn about some avalanche basics, how to read the avalanche forecast, how to avoid avalanche terrain, and some next steps after this presentation. So jumping into some avalanche basics. Why do we even care about avalanches? Well, avalanches are the number one hazard we have to manage while out in the backcountry. These can be potentially life-threatening and can exist on many snow-covered slopes. So in basic terms, what is an avalanche? An avalanche is simply just snow falling down a slope. But depending on the size of the slope, how much unstable snow we have can really dictate the kind of hazard that we're managing and dealing with out in the backcountry. Sometimes we don't even realize that avalanches can form in some unique places. Sadly, many people have been caught and even killed by snow coming off a roof or big avalanches coming down and hitting a roadway while we're unexpectedly driving along the road. So digging into this a little further, there's two main types of avalanches that we're concerned about: loose snow and slab avalanches. Slab avalanches are usually the bigger, more destructive type of avalanches and can oftentimes be harder to predict and harder to manage. These occur when we get a layer of strong snow developing over a weak layer that breaks loose from the surrounding snowpack. Like I said before, these slab avalanches are really dictated by the size of the slope and how thick that cohesive layer of snow is across the terrain. Oftentimes, as snowmobilers or snowbikers, we're moving through terrain really rapidly, so it's very important to understand not just the big, huge avalanche slopes, but also some of these smaller features that have caught plenty of people off guard. You can see from this slide here that big layer of thick, cohesive snow forming over a weak layer below. Depending on how thick that slab is, really dictates the size of avalanche that we're dealing with. Sometimes this can take out the entire seasoned snowpack across an entire slope, creating a massive avalanche. Other times, it can create a smaller slab that can still trip us up and be harmful. Loose snow avalanches are a little bit different. This is where we have weak, cohesionless snow on the snow surface that can start at a point and entrain snow as it moves downhill. Now, there's two types of loose snow avalanches. We have dry snow and wet snow. And this is really just a function of temperature and if that snow surface is cold and dry or wet and unstable. You can see in this picture what a wet, loose snow avalanche looks like. You can see just the wet, kind of mucky snow surface, and it can still entrain a lot of snow, especially if it's a big terrain feature like this. So it's really important to understand some warning signs for these, but we'll get into that a little later. Oftentimes, loose snow avalanches are defined by this teardrop shape where they start at a specific point and fan out as they move down slope. So how do avalanches form? Well, oftentimes the snow surface looks smooth and uniform, but it's not. The snow is very uniform as it's distributed across the ground, and certain weather factors will move that snow from one slope to another. In this picture here, you can see how the wind has scoured one side of a ridgeline and deposited all that snow on the other side, creating a big, thick, cohesive slab. Understanding the layering the snowpack is really the foundation for how avalanches form. Changing weather conditions will create these different layers in the snowpack, and in essence, will create those dangerous conditions when we get that strong layer of snowpack on top sitting on some kind of weaker layer below. There's also changes going on inside the snowpack through a complex process of metamorphism where the snow grains will actually change and create some weaker layers throughout the snowpack. Oftentimes, too, in between storms, the weather conditions will change the snow surface, creating a different layer for that next round of snowfall to fall on, potentially creating a new round of dangerous conditions. In essence, what we're looking for in the backcountry are where we get these strong layers overlighting weak layers. This is the basic recipe or the basic foundation for what causes unstable snow. Trigger points are something we also need to be aware of. Natural avalanches can occur when we get either wind-transported snow across a slope that can load up a slope really quickly or create a big, thick, cohesive slab. Or my favorite is when we get a bunch of new snow that creates a new thick layer of snow on top of a potentially weak layer below, creating that same unstable avalanche condition. And then lastly, the one that I'm most concerned about as a backcountry rider are when we are the trigger. So oftentimes our added influence to the snowpack can change that balance, and we can actually trigger that slab breaking loose on that weak layer below. So understanding avalanche terrain is something less complex and something that we need to be very good at identifying to help stay safe. Oftentimes, people think about the backcountry as this really dangerous environment, but avalanches only live in specific pieces of terrain. Generally, we say slopes steeper than around 30 degrees are where we start being concerned about avalanches. And the real sweet spot is when we have terrain in that 35 to 45 degree angle. So good steep slopes, and understanding too just some of the different areas that you can be in a hazardous position. So the start zone is where the upper part is where avalanches typically start from. They're usually steeper, and we have more of that unstable snow. The track is where that avalanche, once it breaks loose in that start zone, is going to run down through the mountain, and then the run out is where that debris is going to come to rest. I've seen this many times where a whole group of snowmobilers will just be camped out at the bottom of the slope in that run out zone and is in harm's way, unbeknownst to the people sitting there. And we could just be sitting there watching somebody ride up through the track and up into the start zone, and that's typically where they're going to trigger that avalanche. But then you see a whole group of people running for their lives once that snow starts to come down on top of them. So it's really important that when we're posseed up at the bottom of the slope, we stay well out of the potential run out of that avalanche. So if something does happen up high, we don't have to scurry out of the way to avoid being caught. So we're going to dive into a little quiz here. So in this picture, can you identify where the avalanche path is? This was an easy one. You can tell by the crown line and the flanks outlining on this slope where the avalanche occurred. What about this one? It's a little bit more of a complex picture. Hopefully you can see and identify some of the major paths in this picture, defined with these big open slopes where previous avalanches had either carved out the forest, creating a nice clear track and run out. But the thing that concerns me the most are these smaller paths kind of hidden in the trees. As new snow bikes and snow machines have improved and riding techniques have improved, we're really moving through a lot of terrain, and sometimes complex terrain where we're moving in and out through the trees and then pop out on one of these open slopes and trigger an avalanche. So as a good rider, you really want to start looking at slopes and identifying these potentially hazardous places, because it's not just the big open slopes that can rip out, it's any of these small little pockets. What about this one? Hopefully you can see the big major paths where avalanches are pretty obvious, where they could start and run. But again, identifying these smaller little paths in the trees, these open steep slopes, these are oftentimes areas where people get caught kind of unaware. So moving into terrain traps. These are features that really make getting caught in an avalanche more consequential. So even if a small avalanche takes you down through the trees or pushes you off a cliff or into a gully or sometimes even to a creek bed or a lake, really will amplify the consequences of being caught, even if it's a small avalanche. As you can see, when we have an abrupt change at the bottom of a slope, all that snow has nowhere to go, so it piles up really deep in the bottom of this creek bed. These are very consequential terrain features that we need to identify and avoid, because the snow can stack up really deep, and if someone's buried there, they can be very, very, very deep. Oftentimes we like riding through these cool little creek beds and features that we don't necessarily realize that there's big hanging hazards above us. It's very critical to be able to identify these and avoid them so we don't get caught and buried deeply. Trees are another thing that can really increase the consequences of being caught. Oftentimes, even a small avalanche that pushes us down into a tree can really cause some serious injuries. And lastly, God forbid you be caught in an avalanche that takes you down into a lake or in the bottom of a creek bed. But even if you survive the avalanche, you might be soaking wet and have a really nasty extrication if you're cold and wet and can get hypothermic. So understanding this a little bit further, what are the 3 basic ingredients we need for an avalanche? Well, as we talked about, we need that slope. So we need a steep slope, so some piece of avalanche terrain. We need unstable snow, so that's some kind of big slab sitting on top of a weak layer, and we need that trigger, which unfortunately in this case could be us. So to learn a little bit more about avalanches, reading the forecast is paramount. This is a great video that's going to walk us through some of the things about the avalanche forecast, some things you can know, and some things that will help keep you safe.
Snow avalanche danger changes season to season, month to month, and day to day. In other words, each day is different. Avalanche forecasters track snowpack and weather conditions and provide daily avalanche forecasts for many mountainous areas in the United States. Avalanche activity is controlled by the interaction of 3 complex factors: the terrain, the weather, and the snowpack. Whether you are new to the backcountry or a seasoned professional, the avalanche forecast aims to make this complex subject as easy to understand as possible. The information in the forecast begins with simple summary messaging and progresses to more detailed, specific information. The first and most basic component of the forecast is the bottom line. This is take-home messaging for everyone, regardless of avalanche knowledge. The bottom line gives you simple information about 3 basic avalanche questions. What is it? Where is it? And what should you do about it? Think of it as a soundbite or a summary of the most important information for the day. Next is the avalanche danger rating. The scale consists of 5 ascending levels. Your chance of encountering an avalanche increases dramatically with each level. Many avalanche forecasts provide danger ratings for 3 elevation bands. For example, in this view, the danger is rated at considerable at all elevation bands. And in this view, the danger is considerable in the upper band and moderate in the middle and lower band. For a more detailed tutorial on the avalanche danger scale, go here. Avalanche problems are an extension of the danger rating. Avalanches come in many shapes and sizes. Avalanche problems allow you to better visualize and understand the avalanches you may encounter. This section illustrates the type of avalanche, where that avalanche exists in the terrain, how likely you are to trigger it, and how big it will be. This set of graphics is often accompanied by written descriptions and media that help illustrate or explain it. For a more detailed tutorial on avalanche problems, go here. The forecast discussion is an important catch-all where forecasters may provide more specific information on the snowpack, avalanche cycles, complex conditions, or other interesting topics that dive deeper into the what is it, where is it, and what should you do about it questions. Lastly, a mountain weather section is included because it plays such a critical role in both avalanche formation and trip planning. This section provides a basic overview of both the recent weather and the weather you may encounter. Each day is different. The avalanche forecast is an important starting point in your winter planning process. You are in charge. You make the choice. Visit avalanche.org to find the avalanche forecast for your area.
So let's take a second and click on this QR code. This will pull up a map of the CAIC forecast area. To get the forecast for the area you're going to, all you need to do is click on the map where you're going to be riding for the day, and it'll pull up the current bulletin for that area. It's really important as we discuss the current danger rating, the previous danger rating, and all the information you're going to need to help stay safe and make good decisions in the backcountry. So digging into this a little bit deeper, the forecast is really going to give you some travel advice on where you should go, what terrain features you should avoid, what they look like, and maybe some safer options. Also, understanding the danger rating for the day is really important. Not just looking at the color, but really digging into what those different ratings mean and how they're going to make the forecast for the day relevant to what you're doing. We're also going to give you some information on the trends of the current day, what happened the previous day, and the trend for tomorrow. Oftentimes as forecasters, we really look for trends in the snowpack and the weather and how that's going to change these conditions. Weather is also another key component of this forecast. We spend a lot of time looking at weather because that's the main factor that's going to impact the changes in these avalanche conditions. There's also some really cool observation pieces that tell us about where avalanches have been happening, what people have been seeing, and what we're finding as forecasters out in the mountains. So understanding the avalanche danger, there's some very good clues to really understanding these changes. The snowpack doesn't like to change rapidly. So any of these major things, wind drifting, rapidly changing conditions or temperatures, heavy snowfall, cracking, collapsing, and recent avalanches are going to be major red flags that you should clue into to give you some up-to-date information on what's going on. As I mentioned before, wind is a very powerful tool for moving snow. It can transport snow very rapidly from one slope to the other, creating thicker, more cohesive slabs across terrain. But these are also pretty easy to identify. We can usually see snow blowing across ridges. We can see cornices forming, which means that snow has been transporting from one side of the hill over to the other. And we can also see this kind of smooth, rounded texture on the snow surface. These are very visual clues to understanding where wind-drifted snow has been deposited. Rapidly rising temperatures can also create unstable snow conditions. Oftentimes, we can also get some very good clues by seeing these big roller balls coming down, or even the snow surface changing, getting gloppy or kind of sticky. These are also a good clue that the snow might be becoming unstable and avalanches could be more prevalent. Heavy snowfall is another big thing that will rapidly change avalanche conditions. Oftentimes, when we get very significant snowfall, you're going to see the avalanche danger rise quickly. Also, any kind of rain on snow is a very nasty thing that can make snow very unstable. Cracking and collapsing is a very obvious sign that we can see while we're out in the field. As we're moving through terrain, if you feel a big collapse in the snowpack, or you hear that whooping sound, or possibly see these shooting cracks across the slope, these are clear indications that we have unstable snow, and riding on steeper terrain should really be avoided. Lastly, recent avalanches are one of the best clues to understanding unstable snow conditions. If we see avalanches on one slope, we can guarantee they're probably going to happen on the same adjacent slopes or similar slopes with the same characteristics. So really understanding different aspects on the mountain and where these avalanches are forming can give us some great insights on what terrain to avoid. So how do I avoid avalanche terrain? This is a key question. Really getting into avoiding avalanche terrain is one of the best tools you can use to help stay safe. Planning your group all starts at the beginning of the day. So understanding who you're riding with, what their risk tolerance is, what their experience is, reading the avalanche bulletin to understand current danger and conditions, and then using mapping tools to really lay out what terrain you want to avoid for the day. As you're moving into terrain, it's always good to stop and reassess the terrain you're seeing and see if it lines up with the avalanche forecast. This is a great time to talk with your group, see if anybody's noticed anything that you haven't, and keep your group together. And then lastly, at the end of the day, it's always good technique to just look back through the day, look at things that you did well, but really dig into the things that you didn't do well and try to improve on them for the next day. It's pretty amazing some of the new tools that have come online in recent years. A couple of these mapping tools really help you identify with different layers where that steep avalanche terrain exists out in the terrain. By just sitting at home and mapping out our day and pairing that to the avalanche bulletin, we can really define a good route and a good plan to help avoid being in and around avalanche terrain. So what are the next steps after this presentation is done? Well, there's some certain things that you want to consider. If your plan is just to simply avoid avalanche terrain, that's great. That's the best way to just stay safe and avoid the problem. But if you want to engage in avalanche terrain, there's some other techniques you're really going to want to dive into. So if you want to just simply avoid avalanche terrain, you might just be out for a dog walk, snowshoeing, or just riding in the flats. I've had plenty of fun days where my plan for the day was just to simply avoid avalanche terrain. You could be out on a high hazard day and enjoy some awesome riding and just simply stay off big steep avalanche slopes. So to do this, we need to still follow those same rules. We need to first be able to identify that terrain, know what terrain we want to avoid. But we need to always have some good map reading skills to know where we are, if we're in and near terrain, and if that's lining up with our plan for the day. We need to also have some good first aid skills and certainly some good winter travel skills. If we want to engage with avalanche terrain, it's a little bit different. There's more things we're really going to need to dive into. So group management communication is key, especially when riding with a big group. Using radios is a really great way to keep your group intact, but keeping eyes on each other is also very important. It's easy on snow machines as we're moving through to get split up, and even some of those small micro terrain features can be hazardous if we don't have eyes on each other. It can be really perilous if someone gets caught in a small slide and we're not aware. It can be really hard to find them, like trying to regroup, trying to find their track, and they could be buried for much longer than we anticipated. You really have to have a strong set of avalanche rescue skills. This is a very time-sensitive problem, and if someone's buried, you have to know where they are and how to dig them up quickly. So really digging into the avalanche forecast and understanding these conditions, and then having a risk management process that really puts all these pieces together. So understanding who you're riding with, what their risk tolerance is, and then also having a plan if something goes wrong. So digging into the avalanche rescue part, if you're really traveling in and near avalanche terrain and that's your plan, you need to have the gear. So the probe, a transceiver, and a shovel are the most important things to find someone that's buried. An avalanche transceiver or a beacon is simply an electronic device that's going to help you locate the person that's buried. These tools have become really good and really intuitive, but they still take time and practice to master. An avalanche probe is something that an avalanche beacon is going to get you close to the person, but you need to get your probe out and actually pinpoint their exact location before you start digging. And then the last part is the shovel. You need a good, strong, sturdy shovel and learn some good avalanche digging techniques that are more efficient because, like I said, this is a time-sensitive equation, and the faster you can get that person dug out, the better the outcome's going to be. And then lastly, taking an avalanche rescue course. These are perishable skills, and it's really important to learn more advanced techniques, learning how to search with a group so you can be very efficient in one of these situations. It's also important to have some sort of CPR life-saving skills because once that person's dug up, you could be dealing with some life-threatening issues that you need to manage. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you all taking the time to go through this presentation with me. If you have any questions, please hit us up at colorado.gov/avalanche. And I want to thank the people that helped develop this presentation, AIARE, Colorado Avalanche Information Center, and the Northwest Avalanche Center. And lastly, if you can sign up on this QR code to Snowpool, this is a great research project that's helping us really improve our communication skills with the public to help better understand the uncertainty in our forecast products and help constantly improve them to help everyone stay safe. Well, I hope you enjoyed it and hope to see you out there. Thanks.